I received a lot of positive response to my 6 tips for riding the Dempster video. So here are 6 more tips. The link to the first video is in the description. These additional 6 tips should improve your experience, make the trip more memorable, and hopefully easier and safer. These are the basic themes I will cover in the next 20 minutes. Remember, this is free, so take it for what it's worth. You get what you pay for, but I think this will be fun. If you are seriously thinking about tackling the Dempster, stick around for the third tip because it could make all the difference. So let's get started. In the first video, I referenced the importance of planning from a logistics and execution standpoint, but I skipped the part that can make the trip much more memorable. That skipped part missed highlighting the distinctive features and landmarks along the way. I've always been in a bit of a rush on the Dempster because of impending weather, but I was fortunate to stumble across some of these sites by luck. Last week, I saw a video of 2 riders that charged right past the Arctic Circle sign and did not even notice it. They were that focused on the road. Then later, they barely noticed the sign on the way back out. Now I know that seems hard to believe, but the Dempster can be that stimulating, that captivating. So what to look for? First of all, see what other riders have found interesting. And secondly, check out this travel log. This document divides a route into several sections up to Inuvik. And again, there is a link in the description. Here is a look at some of the detail in the travel log. It even shows the location of the microwave towers along the route. And while riding up to the towers is discouraged and a bit trickier, the views can be spectacular. Make sure the track up to the tower is solid so you don't negatively impact this very sensitive environment. This travel log will help you plan what features you may want to catch during your adventure. As a simple example, you would probably miss the nearby lookout viewpoint at the Jack's campground near Inuvik. I would recommend exploring the highway in Google Maps. Reviewing the road will give you an idea of the frequency and location of potential camping locations and what they might look like. This is a quick list of places you could possibly put up a tent. And you'll see I've also listed the airstrips that are along the way. There are road cameras at kilometer 97, 244, and 372, and there are 2 cameras near Inuvik. The camera and current road information is available at 511yukon.ca and drivenwt.ca. And you'll want to reference the 511 Yukon site as you approach the Dempster. Links are in the description. I've also listed the pullouts on the segment between Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk, as this is not in the travel log. Just hit pause if you want to jot them down, but in all cases, it's best to do your own review. And if you have a riding partner, they should do the same. In Google, drop down to Street View and have a look. Much of the filming was done when the fall colors were stunning. I like to stop for pictures at kilometer 136. At a high level, you should know where the screened cabins are with wood camp stoves. They are at kilometer 72, Tombstone, kilometer 195, Engineer Creek, and kilometer 445, Rock River. If it was pouring and you needed to stop, these screened cabins can be an ideal shelter from the storm. Sleeping in these shelters should be an emergency thing and not part of your plan. Almost anyone could understand a solo rider using the shelter as a resource, but a larger group, not so much. Even bicyclists bring their own tents. Eagle Plains, Inuvik, and Tuktoyaktuk have indoor accommodation. I've had accommodation in Fort McPherson, but I'm not sure of the current status. Be aware of the hours of fuel, meals, and accommodation at Eagle Plains. Remember the time change at the border and then the ferry times are in the next time zone. And be aware, bad weather or mechanical issues can stop the ferries. Another couple places for emergency camping could be kilometer 479, where there's a highway services Quonset, and at Midway Lake. Also, Midway Lake has a music festival in August, and Inuvik and Dawson City both have events that attract people. An increase of travelers could impact your journey, so just be aware. If you're doing some initial planning, perhaps plan on catching the Dusk to Dawson ride, not a rally, also referred to as a D2D ride, not a rally, in Dawson City right around solstice every year. I think they like everyone to know it's not a rally. And bring your passport. You never know if a fire en route to the Dempster could divert you through Chicken, Alaska, and you should ride the top of the world road to Chicken anyway. Number 2, mental barrier. This is perhaps the least talked about component of any Dempster trip. The mental barrier is that overwhelming feeling you get at kilometer 0, that internal battle of go or no go. The entire approach ride over several days to kilometer 0 can play subtle tricks on your mind. The story of failed attempts, loose gravel, greasy roads, sharp shale, medevacs, and all the pictures you have seen, even with just the beautiful desolate scenery, can be haunting. The enormity of this daunting task will increase with each kilometer. All of a sudden you are there, kilometer 0, the start line. Just you, the bike, and 1,000 pounds of emotional baggage. The weight of the world and your responsibility crashes down hard on you. Many experienced riders have changed their minds right then and there and do not even venture 200 meters across the first bridge. In that moment, some rain and overcast can be enough for anyone to settle on Dawson City as a fantastic endpoint. A rider coming off the Dempster sharing a difficult experience might just be enough to change your mind. Here is what that actually sounds like. These two riders from Texas had been waiting at the start of the Dempster, but had heard all sorts of horror stories from riders and drivers just coming off the Dempster.
Where are you from?
Texas.
Texas. Yeah, I think we did run into you guys somewhere.
We have. We spent the night in Continental Divide Lodge.
Okay.
And we rode down in the morning and through the rain and the cold, and we stopped at that little town and to get coffee and gas and whatnot.
Which way are you going now?
The same way you guys are going.
Well, we're going that way.
Well, we're not going that way.
Okay.
We bailed on that one.
Did you go part way up?
Nope.
We had decided to go, as the rain had stopped when we got there. We knew the road would be wet, we knew there was rain ahead, but we carried on. At the Tombstone Interpretive Center, kilometer 72, a couple in a 4x4 Jeep told us the road was really bad and did not advise pressing on. I asked about the next 100 kilometers, and they said, no, it was past there when the road got really bad. So we pushed on the next 125 kilometers in drizzle, and we arrived at Engineers Camp at midnight. We woke to a blue sky, sunny day, and continued on. And it's not just motorcyclists that change their mind at that starting gate. Even those with 4 wheels change their minds. But that is not going to be you. You're prepared, cautious, and excited. Embrace the anxiety. Channel that nervous energy into positive energy. Sure, the Dempster is 887 kilometers one way, but it's just 1 kilometer at a time. Break it down into small segments, just like a morning commute to work, 1 segment at a time. Getting to Tombstone campsite is like 3 work commutes. It's just like driving to work Monday morning, back home, and then back to work Tuesday morning. Certainly, you can do that. Tackle the Dempster 1 short section at a time, and things will fall into place. And sure, a 25-kilometer section could take an hour, but more likely it will be a fun 20 minutes. With a few kilometers under your belt, the butterflies disappear, and from then on, it's just a bunch of fun day rides all linked together. There is no doubt there will be some moments, but often they are short-lived, and that insane wobble is now well behind you. Even your heart rate comes back to normal pretty quickly. So set that Tombstone Interpretive Center and the fantastic viewpoint at kilometer 74 as your first milestone. The first part of the Dempster is pretty good, even if it is wet, and getting to Tombstone is 8% of the trek to Tuktoyaktuk completed. This is a critical time to make the right decision. Remember to do ongoing risk assessments and do not hesitate to take cover for a while or even retreat. Sometimes success is making the attempt another time. The mental barrier can be enormous, especially if the weather is marginal, and that's why this next tip is so critical to understand. The starting point of the Dempster itself adds complexity to initiating the ride. I have always traveled from Whitehorse and headed straight onto the Dempster. I've arrived at the Dempster around 6 p.m. 4 times, and on those trips I've made it to kilometer 46 in September of 2018, kilometer 72 in July of 2019, kilometer 195 in July of 22, and I made it all the way to Eagle Plains in July of 2019. I have never gone to Dawson City first. If you can get out of Whitehorse at 7 in the morning, you could be ready to start the Dempster by 3 in the afternoon. And at an average of 70 kilometers an hour, you could make Eagle Plains for fuel and dinner. But perhaps you'll choose to camp earlier or later. Then again, maybe you continue on to Dawson City and start the following day. But this is the critical piece. There is more poor weather in Dawson City and the start of the Dempster than in Inuvik or Tuktoyaktuk. If you can get out of Dawson City and pass that mental barrier at kilometer 0, the weather is likely to be better ahead. You need to know this and look ahead. Can you thread the needle with the weather? Let's have a quick look at the 3 weather statistics in our riding months of June, July, and August. Average cloud cover, rain, and days of precipitation. Links are in the description. This image shows that on average, Dawson City has less clear days than Inuvik, and Tuktoyaktuk is pretty similar to Inuvik. This image demonstrates that on average, Dawson City has 40% more rain during those riding months than Inuvik. Dawson City has double the rainfall of Tuktoyaktuk. These graphs were all at different scales, so I've kind of squeezed them and adjusted them to fit. And while these are averages, the 10th, 25th, 75th, and 90th percentiles are also shown, and they clearly overlap, and they can vary in any specific year. Riders have been stuck for days at each end of the Dempster and in the middle, so you have to assess your opportunity carefully. And this last graph shows the average number of days with at least 1 millimeter of rain. Again, Dawson City is far wetter. Now let's visualize this in terms of the ride. Given the route trends north very quickly, this can be to your advantage as you evaluate the average wet days per month. The weather mostly tends to move from the northwest to the east-southeast. With bad luck, you could ride in bad weather continually. But returning from Tuktoyaktuk, you might pass through it quicker as you're traveling in the opposite direction. As I mentioned in the previous video, the wind is your friend and it really helps with drying out the road. The key takeaway is, if you wait in Dawson City for good weather to start, you might miss your opportunity and never start. We used this to our advantage in 2019 after a failed attempt to reach Tuk in September of 2018. We retreated from Eagle Plains when we were met with bad weather, a miserable forecast ahead, and snow on the road at the border. It was a bit crushing, but not unexpected. So in 2019, We left Watson Lake at about 9 in the morning and arrived at Whitehorse just after lunch. I was riding on a street tire and we were going to swap it out in Whitehorse, but the forecast was for rain in Dawson City the following day, so we called Eagle Plains and made a reservation. We rode the 860 kilometers from Whitehorse to make it a 1,300 kilometer day. The last 100 kilometers we rode in a steady rain and arrived at the hotel at 1 in the morning. There was steady rain the next morning and they let us use their shop to swap out my street tire. We left Eagle Plains in overcast skies at about 4 p.m. We arrived at the Northwest Territory border 2 hours later in rain and fog. We'd picked up a solo rider that was planning on turning back but decided to come with us. The weather and roads steadily improved and we eventually rode into Tuktoyaktuk at 1 a.m. under blue skies, a low sun, and a bajillion mosquitoes. Make sure you have a mosquito head net and repellent. However, with weather, there's no guarantee. I've had rain on every trip. Make sure that you have about 3 extra days to sit out some bad weather. So watch the weather as you approach, the short and the long-term forecasts. Look at that weather window and find a way to sneak through. And now packing. All of that previous stuff integrates into the packing, and what does your ride strategy look like? Is this an adventure all about the destination, or is it the journey? Is this a rapid 3-day attack, take no prisoners adventure, or is this more of a 4 to 7 day experience? You're going to spend at least 3 nights on the Dempster. Where you plan on staying will partially define what you need. If the plan is staying at hotels, what if you don't make it? The weather and road conditions will define what you need, but at the same time, carry as little as weight as possible. This is a one-way in, one-way out journey. Carry essential items only. Plan to cache gear to reduce your weight. Most adventure riders start with about 100 pounds of gear. For the Dempster, you should be able to cache non-essentials and get that weight down to, say, 55 pounds, which would include 5 liters of fuel and 3 liters of water. Put that 5 liters into the bike when you can to keep the weight down as low as possible. Be careful refueling as the environment is very sensitive. Keep the weight low in your panniers instead of on your seat. Panniers are great, especially if you have a tip over. So if there are 2 or more of you, split all the weight you can. Do you really need 2 tents, 2 cook stoves, 2 compressors, 2 sets of tools, 2 chairs on a one-way road? What do you really need for food? There are restaurants in Eagle Plains, Inuvik, and Tuk, and sometimes Fort McPherson. But if you have a good weather window, carry a bit more weight, go slower, and enjoy. My recommendation would be to attack with fierce determination on the way up and then slow things down on the retreat if the weather permits. Just assess and adjust. If the weather turns on you, be ready to sit things out for a while. I have no doubt you'll carry a first aid kit, but what is your experience with an injury? When was the last time you took a first aid course? More importantly, what do you remember? Do you remember all the acronyms? ABC, FAST, the steps to CPR. Definitely consider taking a first aid course before the trip, or a biker-specific course such as Biker Down. Get an app for your phone such as the Red Cross app. It has a wealth of information that can be used offline. Here's a brief example. Okay, so I'm clicking on the app at the bottom. I'm looking at different tests you could take to check yourself, what you would do in an emergency. There's all these things, how to prepare for everything, and then if you want to learn something. So in this case, I'm going to go all the way down to unresponsive, not breathing, and I can scroll through here and get the basic information as to what to do. Then there's additional information, and you can click on that and the information will come up for you. And again, this works without internet or Wi-Fi. And then we'll go back up to the top and you can actually learn.
Marco, what's happened? Wake up!
Check for breathing by tilting their head backwards. Look and feel for breaths. Call 911 immediately. Give chest compressions by pressing firmly downwards in the middle of the chest. Push at a rapid rate until help arrives.
Do you even know how to remove a helmet safely if you need to assess someone's breathing? Based on the 2015 Dempster Motorcycle Research, 83% of riders were older than 45, and 52% were older than 55 years old. So let's face it, if you are older riders, you could be dealing with a medical emergency that has nothing to do with the riding at all. Are you carrying sufficient medical ID? Is it on your person so they know it's you? Do you have emergency contact information for you and any other riders with you? Do they have yours? Do you have medical coverage? Where is that information? Do you know where the emergency airstrips are? How about a few places along the route with cell coverage? Are you carrying a satellite communicator? And be aware, the newer iPhones have some satellite capability but are not reliable above the Arctic Circle. And for all the costs associated with this adventure and all the other trips you go on, seriously consider investing in a first aid course. And lastly, prepping your bike. This trip, more than most, requires dedicated mechanical attention to your motorcycle. The Dempster is 1,700 kilometers of constant vibration and bouncing, which can loosen bolts and break things. Parts and service simply do not exist. You are on your own. A detailed pre-trip inspection and replacing mostly worn parts is advisable. I would recommend checking all major bolts with a torque wrench and ensure that those that need it are secured with Loctite. Make sure all of those tools are part of your kit. Consider marking your bolts with a paint stick so at a glance you can see if they're loosening. Do a walk around and scan your bike each and every time you stop, and maybe scan each other's bikes every third stops. And there you have it, the 6 tips. Remember, just making it to the start of the Dempster is a great accomplishment. Thanks for your time, and I do appreciate your attention and any comments. Enjoy your journeys wherever they take you.